97.7 QLZ's Third String Morning Show.
Mental health awareness, near and dear to me. I am Mo Lightning, joined on the phone with Joseph Pinola from the You Rock Foundation and 1 Million Mohawks. Joseph, thank you for your time today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And normally when I do these phone calls, I normally have notes in front of me, bullet points of what to talk about, but I don't this time around because I just want to have a discussion that opens up communication about mental health awareness and just see if we can bring awareness to the people tuned in right now.
I prefer it that way.
Let's start with the You Rock Foundation. You know, for anybody that maybe is not aware of what the You Rock Foundation is, what is it?
Okay, so we've been around for 4 years now, and it was really born out of a desire for me to create something that would have helped me when I was at my worst. I'm a 2-time suicide attempt survivor. I still battle depression every day. I'm currently medicated and 7 months sober. Just to give you a little context of my background, but rewinding all the way back to when I was a teenager, struggling with the loss of my father, who died mysteriously in a car accident. I took it the worst out of everyone in my family. That was the beginning of my downward spiral. As the eldest of 3 children, there was a lot of pressure, both, subtle and obvious. The more obvious being that I was told, you're the man of the house now. You need to be strong for your mother and your siblings. And someone who's falling apart, that's very hard to do, to keep up appearances, the pressure of not being able to voice the pain I was in, you know? The pain itself is so draining, but then to add the extra weight of wearing a mask of everything being okay just worsens it exponentially. So, for those reasons and more, I didn't feel comfortable talking about what I was dealing with, talking about my depressive thoughts, talking about how I was cutting myself, talking about how I wanted to die. So, instead of admitting that, instead of talking about it, instead of seeking treatment, going to therapy, any of those things, I turned to music. I put on my headphones, I blasted my stereo, and bands like 9 Inch Nails that were singing about very scary, very angry, very sad things were there for me when no one else was. And I let those lyrics speak when I felt like I didn't have a voice of my own. That music was the gateway to me eventually opening up, being able to talk about my feelings and get treatment, start seeing a therapist, going to the hospital and getting a psych evaluation, being in there, talking to a psychiatrist, starting to do things like exercise and eat better, because it all impacts your mental health. Mm-hmm. So I have music to give credit for me rising from the ashes, so to speak. Now, I know I'm rambling a bit, Mo, but to finish the story, fast forward to 4 years ago when I came up with You Rock. I'm working in the music industry, and I'm trying to come up with a community project idea. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God, if music by itself is so powerful, how much more empowering would it be to hear the stories directly from the musicians who wrote those songs that so many of us around the world connect with? That's what You Rock does. We talk to like globally recognized rock stars like Corey Taylor from Slipknot and Stone Sour, get them in front of a camera where it's really raw and intimate to the point where they're looking at the camera lens and you feel like you're in the room with them. And they're not talking about touring. They're not talking about what it was like recording the last album. They're talking about the stuff that is very hard for people to talk about. Things like suicide attempts, things like depression, anxiety, and other mental illnesses, substance abuse. I could go on, but by them stepping up having the courage to be vulnerable on camera in public like that, that kind of courage is contagious, and it gives other people hope. Oh my God, if my hero's stepping off this pedestal I put him on and showing me he's human, he's dealt with things I have, maybe even worse, and he's got through it. He got better. Maybe I can get better. He's talking about it. Maybe I can talk about it. And it's this catalyst for a much-needed conversation in our culture.
Very much so, very much so. We're speaking with Joseph Pinola from the You Rock Foundation, where, again, real artists give us real stories. Nothing More, Filter, Danzig, Butcher Babies, just to name a few on the main page alone. Now, music helps many of us. You talked about music helping save you at times, getting you on the right path. I know I can vouch, and the same thing for me with my suicidal thoughts and my history and whatnot. So I get it. But what happens when the musicians who save us can't save themselves? We've seen it with Chris Cornell recently, and this week, within the last couple of days, Chester Bennington of Linkin Park fighting his own demons. How can we, maybe as fans, professionals, whatever, how can we help these guys? They help us. What can we do to help them?
I think we need to do what we would do for any other person. Again, kind of removing that pedestal and just getting on the same plane. Remember, we are all human beings. Take away our professions, take away our genders, take away our skin color. Take all that away. Everyone wants to feel loved. Everyone wants to be understood. Something I didn't talk about, and what I'd like people to know out there is, like, You Rock has a little catchphrase, and everyone says it at the end of those video interviews I just talked about. Very simple. You matter. You're needed. You rock. And that's ultimately how we want everyone to feel. Everyone in the world. Because if you matter, that's like baseline. That's what you need to be built from. You recognize, acknowledge your existence and its impact. Next level up, needed. You feel pulled. It's not enough to exist. There's, whether it's family, friends, or a vocation, like that will get you to actually live, not simply exist. And then finally, rocking, AKA thriving, not just surviving. Like, we want to get people to see all of that in themselves. And that's what even people like Chester, I'm sure, needed and wanted to feel, that they mattered, that people out there needed them, and certainly that they rocked. They had such a massive impact. Linkin Park, and him in particular, as one of the main songwriters. Voice. It could be argued he's a voice of a generation. Linkin Park were huge for people like myself when they made their debut back when I was in high school. To answer your question in a very long-winded way, what can we do for them? Because they've done so much for us. Do what you would do for everyone. Acknowledge them. Thank them. Let them know that they matter. Let them know that they're needed, so they can see the value of themselves. Speaking as someone with depression, I think a great way to describe it, granted everyone's experience is different, but there's a voice inside your head, a version of you that distorts reality, that kind of gets you to see the world and yourself in kind of a funhouse mirror in your mind. It distorts everything, and that voice is on an endless loop. And if you hear anything as ridiculous as it is, if you hear it enough, it's eventually going to be true. People with depression, like myself, you shared a little about your suicidal thoughts, so I'm hoping you can relate. But if you tell yourself you're ugly, you're worthless, you're not enough, no one loves you, any of those terrible things that you probably wouldn't say to anyone in real life, but you tell yourself constantly, if you hear that all the time, it's going to be your reality. You're going to believe it. That's why it's so crucial to have people in your life to kind of show you that's a lie. That's a terrible, awful lie. thank God I have an amazing family, amazing friends, the best girlfriend anyone can ask for, who kind of shatter that funhouse mirror, the metaphorical funhouse mirror I mentioned, and show me, no, I know you're thinking that. I know that's what you see, but it's not true. That is not true. It's farthest thing from the truth. And without knowing Chester, without hearing about the circumstances of his personal life, I would wager that he had a very similar experience to what I just described. To put it very simply, I would say talk to people. Let them know how much you care about them.
For me, I've noticed in my history, because I've suffered from mental illness for 12 years, give or take now, and I've noticed something as simple as, hey, how are you doing? And somebody genuinely asking that question is enough for me to feel that self-worth again. It doesn't have to be overly, oh my God, you're great at what you do, or no, it doesn't have to be anything over the top, but just a genuine question of, hey, how are you doing, with the person listening can do a world of difference for me.
That's excellent, Mo. That's an excellent insight, and people would benefit from following that suggestion. And a little addition to that, it's important that you ask genuinely, because how many times have you heard the insincere kind of automatic default, oh, hey, how's it going? And the person isn't really even waiting for your response. It's kind of just like built in, like a hi, hello.
Or conversely, or if I can interrupt you there, conversely, the flip side of things, like, well, it's been a rough day, or hey, I'm having a rough go of it lately. Oh, me too. And it becomes a bit of a comparison rather than an actual support.
Yeah, another great observation. So you've probably heard this at some point. Luckily, it's a phrase that's been making the rounds. Listen to actually listen. Don't listen to reply. Listen to understand. And when you are listening, when you're like genuinely, sincerely there, when you are present with that person, you'll be able to tell what's going on with them, even if they're like not honest with you. If they are not making eye contact with you, if their voice is low, and they say they're fine, you're going to know they're not fine, and you're going to be able to ask them, really? Because you don't seem fine. And if you are genuine, if you show you actually care, chances are they will open up to you. And that's what we need to encourage more of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just talking about this, putting this on the air, putting this on the website helps bring awareness, because unfortunately there's still a bit of a stigma out there. There's a lot of people who don't understand that mental illness is real, and they think it's just like, it's a mentality that we're doing it to ourselves, that maybe we're dramatic, where, well, just don't think like that. But you can't just tell a bone to not be broken. You have to give it time. You have to heal. And the scary thing about mental illness is it typically won't go away. You can medicate, you can go to therapy. There are methods to make it better, but every single person's different. So you can't just take a medication and then a week later you're no longer depressed.
Exactly. I think the comparison of mental illness to physical illness is one that always needs to be brought up. I also think about how, like, if someone you used broken bones, so I'll continue using that specific example. Someone breaks their leg, people are like, rush over to them and sign the cast and be like, oh, how you're doing. It's almost like it kind of invites connection, whereas someone with a mental illness coming out of the psych ward, the opposite tends to happen. If that person admits to that happening, or is wearing the bracelet from the hospital, or is carrying around prescription for antidepressants, people are not going to rush over and sign your prescription medication bottle. More often than not, unfortunately, they're going to take a step back and probably avoid that person because of the terrible stigma attached to mental illness.
Yeah. Yeah, I know some of my closest friends have had issues over the years, and I've had to reassure them over time that just treat me normal. Treat me like your friend. If you want to check in from time to time and talk a little bit deeper than the, hey, whatever we usually talk about subjects, great. But don't take a step back. That I've seen that from my friends, that they've taken a step back after they know I've been in a bout or I've had a close call with some bad thoughts. They don't know what to do. They feel like they're going to step on the wrong toes or head the wrong direction. But I tell them, treat me normal because I am normal. I'm just having a tough time.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion, and I'm glad you've been suggesting it. I think of course, we can't speak for everyone out there.
Oh, sure, of course
with
not.
a mental illness, but given how many conversations I've had personally with people across this country and actually beyond into some European states, almost all of them are on board with exactly what you said. They want to be treated normal. They don't want to be treated like, like they're insane, like the terrible stereotype that's kind of permeated our culture.
Absolutely. Last thing, and then I'll let you go here. You're a part of something called 1 Million Mohawks. What is that?
It started, I have to give credit to my friend and colleague, Jesse Heffernan, out of Wisconsin, for coming up with the concept. He does a lot of recovery work for people with substance use disorder and who are dealing with alcoholism, addiction. He's an amazing individual. It was his idea, and another one of my co-creators, also based in Wisconsin, is Anthony Alvarado of an amazing recovery nonprofit called Rise Together. But the whole idea was, the most well-known viral charitable campaign is the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And we loved the idea of challenging people to do something to show how much they cared about mental health and spreading awareness. So Jesse came up with the idea, well, you rock, so closely tied to the rock community, both the musicians and the fans. What's more rock and roll than a mohawk? What if we challenged people to get a mohawk, whether an extreme version like me? I have my head shaved except for a stripe of hair down my head right now, or if they simply spiked their hair up long enough to take a photo, or if they're bald, they painted a stripe down it, whatever. But the point was to participate, to actually take action, do something, show you care enough to do something with your hair and use the attention your hair gets to talk about the brain beneath it. So that was the idea, and I got a couple of my rock star friends like Jesse Leach from Killswitch Engage and the gentleman from Stone Sour to participate in it. And we didn't hit the 1 million that we wanted, but we were very pleased with the results we got, especially considering that, again, it wasn't just in the U.S., it was across the country. We got teenagers, we got pets. My 95-year-old grandma did it. Like, if you go on the U-Rock Instagram and, scroll through, you'll laugh and you'll be inspired all at the same time, just seeing the wealth of contributors we've had in that campaign. It was really beautiful to watch.
I challenge anybody listening to this right now, if you have some of the issues that we've talked about or relatable issues that we've talked about, let's do this. I'm more than happy to step up. I mean, you may have done the 1 Million Mohawks and try to get it within a set amount of time, but I think this is an idea that is probably going to exist for a while on its own. And I challenge anybody listening right now, let's do it. You and I, let's just do the Mohawk and let's support the cause.
Awesome. I don't know if you've read about it or seen any of it, but there have been a really disheartening amount of people using this tragedy as an opportunity to make jokes, like, oh, the music world's better off without him.
Mm-hmm.
Linkin Park's music is so terrible. All that stuff. I even this is much more common than I'd like it to be as well. But people saying it's a coward's way out, Head from Korn, who I'm scheduled to interview next week, was one of the people who said that. I think he's since apologized. There's a quote I'd like to share with you, and again, I think it's worth sharing simply so you know it and you can share it in your private conversations, but for everyone out there who thinks it's cowardly, and just because they've never had a suicidal thought, like, it seems impossible. How could a successful rock star married with kids, how could he do this? One of my favorite authors / speakers, David Foster Wallace, who unfortunately took his life at some point, said it better than anyone on record, in my opinion. I'm going to share that with you here.
Please.
I made sure to print it out so I did not butcher his beautiful, beautiful prose. This is David Foster Wallace. The so-called psychologically depressed person who tries to kill herself doesn't do so out of, quote, hopelessness or any abstract conviction that life's assets and debits do not square, and surely not because death seems suddenly appealing. The person in whom its invisible agony reaches a certain undurable level will kill herself the same way a trapped person will eventually jump from the window of a burning high-rise. Make no mistake about people who leap from burning windows. Their terror of falling from a great height is still just as great as it would be for you or me standing speculatively at the same window, just checking out the view, i.e., the fear of falling remains a constant. The variable here is the other terror, the fire's flames. When the flames get close enough, falling to death becomes the slightly less terrible of two terrors. It's not desiring the fall, terror of the flames. And yet nobody down on the sidewalk looking up yelling, "Don't!" and "Hang on!" can understand the jump. Not really. You'd have to personally been trapped and felt flames to really understand a terror way beyond falling.
That is amazing. That is completely appropriate. That is completely true. And I've never heard that before, but I do thank you for sharing that, because that is a near perfect explanation.
I hate to be the guy asking for a plug, but if people want more information, please go to 1millionmohawks.com, and that's the number 1millionmohawks.com, or urockfoundation.org, and you could see some of the videos we talked about. You could, click on the social media icons. I don't know, whatever your preference is in terms of following us and contributing to our very important mission, all the information's there.
97.7 QLZ. Anything that rocks.